Hello there. Tonight we take a gentle walk into Plato's most famous image, the quiet cave where shadows drift across a wall and people learn, very slowly, what those shadows mean. We will not hurry or argue. We will sit where the air is cool and the floor is packed smooth by many feet, and we will let the story arrange itself. A fire burns somewhere behind us. Figures pass in front of it. Shapes appear and glide across the stone. That is enough to begin. Plato invited his students to imagine this place so the mind could feel the difference between what is easy to see and what is truly there, between habit and understanding, between the comfort of what we already believe and the wider light that waits outside. We will move in small steps. First, the cave as a room you can picture. Then the prisoners, the fire, and the shapes they watch. Then the moment when one person stands and turns. Later, the slow climb upward, the bright mouth of the cave, and the world that takes time to look at without pain. We will consider why someone would return to the dim room after seeing the day, and what kind of kindness and patience such a return requires. There will be no sharp turns, just clear scenes, steady breaths, and long, even sentences that keep your thoughts company while your body settles. If your eyes grow heavy, let them. The story is old enough to keep its shape without you, and when you wake it will still be here, a calm place to sit while the mind warms to the idea that understanding is not a leap, but a slow turning toward a better light. Imagine a long chamber carved out of rock, a place that feels older than any name you could give it. The air is cool and still. The floor is packed smooth by many feet that have stood here for years. From the entrance, you cannot see the sky, only a pale suggestion of brightness far away, the kind of light that tells you morning and evening are real even if you do not step into them. Most of the room lies in a gentler dimness, enough to see shapes, not enough to count stones. Sound travels well here. A cough crosses the floor and returns to the ear a moment later, as if the cave has learned to talk back in a low voice. Along the far wall, a row of people sit facing the stone. Their legs are folded or stretched as the day allows. Their backs remember the same place on the same ground, and their eyes know the same section of wall so well that the smallest stain looks familiar. They are not bound by iron in this telling. Habit holds them more firmly than a chain would. They face forward because forward is where the room makes sense. The wall has become a kind of page, and the page is never blank for long. Across it move shadows with clear edges, long, short, narrow, wide, sometimes slow, sometimes quick, always available for watching. Behind these watchers, a quiet lane runs the length of the cave, raised slightly above the floor, with a low parapet like the lip of a shallow stage. Behind the parapet, there is a fire built at a careful distance. It does not roar. It behaves like an old servant with steady hands, light enough to paint the wall, not so strong that it blinds. Between the flame and the watchers, along the lane, people walk. They carry things they need and things they wish to show. Some items are plain, baskets, tools, a branch with leaves still on it. Some are shaped to resemble animals or small figures or the front of a ship. The carriers talk to one another as people do when they share a path and share a task. The path becomes a small town that never quite sleeps. Because of this arrangement, the wall is rarely quiet. The objects lifted or passed along the parapet cut the firelight, and their outlines float across the stone like a procession on a river. A long neck becomes a bird. A square with a short line becomes a house and a road. A curve becomes a cup that tips. A toothed edge becomes a saw that bites. The watchers learn these shapes and give them names. After a while, they not only see a shadow, they hear its name in the mind before the outline has fully formed. The naming is part of the comfort of the place. A scene is easier to live in when most things have a familiar label. From time to time, the voices of the carriers reach the front of the room. Sometimes the voice is attached to the shadow that seems to fit it, and the watchers nod with the satisfaction of a match. Sometimes the voice is attached to something else farther along the line, and there is a small confusion that settles into a small game. Someone begins to predict which shadow will speak next. Someone else listens for a pattern in the footsteps and tries to guess which shape will be tall or short. These small games pass an hour without strain. They are the cave's weather. A few wins, a few misses, a little laughter, then quiet again. You can feel how such a place becomes a school. The stone is a blackboard with its own chalk. The fire is the lamp that never complains. The lane is a lesson in order, a single direction that delivers scenes in a line. No one has to ask for silence because the cave provides it. No one has to invent a test because the wall is always asking the same soft question. What will cross me next, and what shall we call it when it does? A child could learn here. An old person could pass the time here. A tired mind could rest here and still feel it has watched something and understood it well enough to sleep. Plato's point sits quietly inside this picture. The cave is not a prison built by enemies. It is a room that works. It is a room that rewards attention with recognition and offers talk to fill the gaps between one shape and the next. If you lived here long enough, you would grow fluent in shadows. You would remember the outline of a branch and feel you had met a tree. You would hear a voice and feel you had met a person. You would be able to sort quick from slow, simple from complex, new from familiar, and you would be right often enough to feel at home. That is why the cave is persuasive. It gives you a world that behaves, and it asks very little from you in return. Let one more detail settle before we move on. Far behind the fire there is a slope that leads upward, not a steep climb, just a steady grade a person could walk if they wished. At the top of that slope there is a mouth to the outside where day does whatever day does. The watchers do not look that way because the wall in front of them holds their work. The carriers do not look that way because the lane keeps their feet and hands occupied. The fire does not look that way because flames never look away from their fuel. The opening exists all the same. You do not need to stare at it now. It is enough to know that the cave has an exit and that the exit leads to something brighter than this room knows how to hold. For tonight, this is all we need. A cool chamber, a steady flame, a quiet lane with a low parapet, a wall that receives what passes behind, and a group of people who watch and name and feel that they have lived another day because the page in front of them filled and emptied and filled again. In the next chapter, one person will turn, not from contempt for the room, but from a simple movement of curiosity that has been waiting for its hour. The cave will stay where it is. The others will keep their places. Only one set of eyes will ask to see where the light begins, and the body attached to those eyes will stand and feel the room change. For now, let the shadows drift. Let the names rise and fall. Let the fire keep its slow promise. The cave can hold you until sleep arrives. Imagine that one watcher, after years of facing the wall, shifts a shoulder as if to ease a knot and finds that the knot eases more than expected. The body remembers there are other directions. The neck, stiff from loyalty to one view, tests a small arc and holds it, then adds another. Nothing heroic happens. No chain snaps. A person simply turns a little farther than yesterday, and the room, which has always been there, begins to rearrange itself. The wall is still in sight, but not as a horizon. Now it is a surface off to the side, a familiar friend encountered from a new angle. The sound of footsteps that used to arrive without a source now has bodies to stand in. The soft heat that painted shadows now throws its actual light on skin. The first sensation is not insight. It is discomfort. Eyes taught to read only reflections blink at the direct sight of flame. Edges lose their politeness and show their glare. The mind, used to knowing what the next shape means, no longer knows. It wants the wall back in the center because there the guessing was easy and usually right. The turn watcher does not become a philosopher in a moment. He becomes a person with watering eyes, a throat that feels dry from air warmed by fire, and a wish to sit down again where everything behaved. It helps to say this plainly. Change in Plato is not a trumpet blast. It is a slow ache under the eyelids and a hand groping for balance. When the blinking steadies, the lane behind the parapet comes into focus. It is ordinary, and because it is ordinary, surprising. The things that made the shadows are simply things. A small carved horse held by a person who is not in a hurry. A shallow basket that throws a round shape when it tilts. A spray of leaves bound with twine. A plank with a square cut from one edge. A cup raised for a moment and lowered again. The carriers talk the way carriers do, half about the task and half about what the day will ask after this task is done. Their voices do not come from the wall, of course. They come from mouths, and once you see that, the earlier confusion about which shadow spoke seems like a game that entertained a long afternoon rather than a puzzle worth defending. The fire itself proves patient. It is neither a god nor a trick, only a managed blaze in a low hearth built, so that the heat does the work and the smoke has somewhere to go. It throws light forward and shadows with it because that is what fires do when a surface waits in front of them. If you sit near it, you feel your face warm and your back cool. If you sit a little farther, you feel the room even out and your breathing slow. If you place your hand near the parapet, your skin tells you what the wall never could. How wide the lane is, how steady the carrier's pace must be to keep the procession smooth, how much care has been taken to keep embers from leaping where bare feet might pass. At this point, the turn watcher looks back, not to mock the others, but because habit is kind and still wants to share what it finds. The wall is doing what it has always done, bearing its moving pictures with dignity. The watchers are doing what they have always done, reading the pictures with the fluency of practice. He could sit down again and resume the fluent life, and for a heartbeat the pull is real, because fluency feels like safety. Yet something in the chest, call it curiosity or hunger or a small loyalty to what is true, asks for one more step. The step is small, not toward the wall, not toward the carriers, simply along the lane toward the slope where the air feels a little different, as if the cave itself were remembering a season the room does not mention. On the way, the turn watcher notices a detail the wall could never teach. Things do not only cast shadows, they also bear them. The back of a carved figure is plain where the front is careful. The basket is heavy when it is full and careless when it is empty. The person who holds a plank shifts grip when a splinter bites, and the face makes the quick line that hands make when wit speaks. These small facts do not refute the shadows. They explain them. The wall was not lying. It was only limited. Understanding does not erase what you knew. It sets the earlier knowledge inside a room with more windows. There is, too, a change in sound. Echoes that used to be music without instruments are now music with a source. You hear the soft clack of wood against the parapet, the whisper a robe makes against a knee, the hurried coordination when two carriers share a long, awkward object and try to keep its ends from arguing. Speech itself sounds different when you can see the mouth that shapes it. The same words sit closer to their reasons. The same jokes land with a warmer weight because you can watch the eyes ask for permission to be light and the other eyes grant it. As the slope nears, the light stiffens. It is not merely brighter. It is of a different quality, less like a hearth and more like day. The body responds before the mind writes a sentence about it. There is a small lift under the breastbone, the way breath changes when a door opens to outside air. The ears notice a thin sound that is not quite wind and not quite quiet, a kind of width that rooms cannot make. Even the fire behind seems to agree that its range has an end. Flame is a good servant here, and the cave is a good house, but both are local goods. Beyond them is a different kind of seeing for which the body is built even if habit has delayed the appointment. It is fair to admit that fear visits at this threshold. The turned watcher glances back again and for a moment feels rude, as if leaving a gathering before the story finishes. He wonders if the carriers will be offended or the watchers will feel abandoned. He wonders if the slope will make a fool of him, if the light will be so strong that the eyes will refuse to learn, If the world beyond will make the cave feel small, and therefore make him feel small for having loved it. Plato lets all these human thoughts have their time. The answer is not to deny them, but to keep walking anyway, with the gentleness you would use when waking a child who fell asleep in a chair and should finish the night in a bed. Before the mouth of the cave, another adjustment begins. The eyes, newly brave with firelight, now meet a brightness that does not flicker. Pain returns, sharper at first, then dulled by patience. Tears come again and do honest work. Objects do not yet resolve into themselves. You see only a wash, a promise, a geometry of glow and shadow without edges. The mind tries to name what it cannot properly see and, failing, quiets. This quiet is useful. A person cannot learn a new light with the old speed. The turned watcher stands without hurry and lets the eyes practice being instruments rather than judges. If you pause the scene here, you can feel how Plato respects each stage. Facing the wall teaches recognition. Turning teaches that sources exist. Walking the lane teaches that causes have textures and weights. Standing at the mouth teaches that there are lights that do not borrow their life from fire. Nothing valuable is scorned. Each step includes the last and adds something the last could not hold. The person has not become wise. He has become ready to see what wisdom would be about. In the next chapter, he will step into the wider day and suffer the kindness of clarity. For tonight, the cave is behind, the opening is in front, and the body, loyal as ever, is learning how to face a world that will not wait to be translated into shadows. The first step into daylight is not triumph, it is tenderness. Air moves differently outside. It carries open space on its back. The ground gives a little under the heel and sends up a smell of dust and green. Light arrives from everywhere at once instead of from a single obedient flame, and the eyes, loyal to their training, protest. They close hard, then open in slivers, then fill with tears that make the world a soft, quivering glaze. You stand there as people do when they have walked out of a dark theater at noon, surprised that brightness can feel like weight. Nothing is clear yet. That is all right. Plato asks for patience first. Learning begins with mercy for the eyes. You do not stare at the source. You look for gentler things that borrow light. At your feet, a shallow pool has gathered in a hollow of stone. Its surface is a small mirror that moves when the breeze moves. Shadows pass over it, and do not frighten. If you lean closer, you can make out shapes not on a wall, but in water, branches crossing, a fly that writes its circle, your own outline bending toward itself. Reflections are a kind first lesson because they obey your speed. You can look away, look back, and the world does not insist. The mind, comforted by this softness, remembers how to name without hurrying to be right. From reflections, you graduate to the things reflected. You trace a branch up from its picture to its living wood and find leaves with veins like small roads. You follow the line of a rock from edge to shadow and feel, under your fingers, the cool that the eye guessed at. You look at your own hands and see not only shape but story, small scrapes from old tasks, a curve the cave never mentioned, the way light settles along a knuckle and makes even stillness look alive. The lessons are not yet lofty. They are close, ordinary, steadying. The body calms because the world proves to be textured rather than sudden, and detail, taken in the right portion, is a lullaby. When the eyes have learned this much, you try the sky, but you try it sideways. You do not aim at the sun. You give yourself time by beginning at the edges. You watch a pale wash where blue begins and recognize, with a little shock, that color is not the cave's trick but the day's quiet habit. A bird crosses and becomes a sentence with wings. You notice how a cloud's underbelly carries shadow even in a world full of light, and how that shadow is not the same as the darkness you left. It is shaped by the very thing that makes seeing possible. This is the turn of mind Plato wants. Not contempt for shadows, but understanding of how they belong to brightness and are made honest by it. Evening is a teacher as kind as water. As the sun slopes, the world stops shouting its details and returns them in gentler tones. The first star pricks through and holds still, and the eyes, no longer stung, can practice distance without pain. The moon rises with its patient face, and you learn another lesson. There are lights that do not burn, lights that are given and passed along, lights that teach by rhythm. Under this calmer sky, the mind can reach farther without squinting. You can think about time, the way the day gave you what you could bear when you could bear it. And you can think about gratitude without speeches because the body feels what the words would say. In the morning, when you are ready, you test a glance toward the source. Not long, not bravely, just enough to know where the warmth comes from. The sun is not a picture, it is a cause. It does not argue, it makes. On the ground, the proof is everywhere. Colors that woke when light touched them, growth that leaned, stones that shed the chill the cave would have kept. Plato will have a name for this, something like the good that gives truth to what is and power to the knower. But tonight the name can wait. The felt fact is enough. Things are clearer when lit, and a life is kinder to itself and others when it aims, however slowly, toward what clarifies. With sight comes a new modesty. You notice how much you misjudged when you lived by wall and echo alone. You also noticed that the cave was not false. It was partial. It trained attention. It offered order. It made a place where minds could keep busy without breaking. You can be grateful for that while admitting its limit. This mix of gratitude and accuracy is the beginning of gentleness with other people. You will need it if you ever go back to share what you have found, because those who sit where you sat deserve respect for the fluency they earned, even as you invite them to turn and see what that fluency could be nested inside. Before the chapter closes, the day sets one more lesson in your hands. You take a simple object, a cup of water, a leaf, a piece of bread, and hold it where light can touch it from the side. Edges appear, then soften. The thing you thought you knew becomes more itself. You turn it slowly and watch how shine moves like a thought learning to speak. This is how understanding feels when it is healthy. Not a seizure, not a conquest, but a careful rotation in a patient hand until the same object gives you a little more of its truth. You breathe in, you breathe out. You realize that seeing is a practice, not a prize. Let the work stop there. The eyes have traveled far enough for one night. From fire to reflection, from reflection to things, from things to sky, from sky to a glimpse of the source. There is no ribbon to cut. There is a place to sit. The ground is warm where the day has been keeping it. The air is cooler now and smells like stone giving back what heat it kept. If sleep wants you, do not argue. The world will hold its shape while you rest. In the next chapter, we will ask why anyone would return to the dim room after learning this wider light, and how to speak so that turning feels possible to someone who has not yet thought to try. For now, keep the kindness of the day. It taught you without scolding. Let night do the same. After a while, an open-air question ripens. Why go back? The slope behind you is easy now. The pool, the leaves, the sky with its patient clock. These have become a kind of home. Yet the cave still exists, and the people you shared hours with still face their wall. Gratitude tugs one way, duty another, and somewhere between them lives a quieter motive that does not need a name. You remember what it felt like to mistake a shadow for a thing and to feel clever for doing it well. You remember that no chain had to be broken, only a neck had to turn. If it was kindness when the day taught you gently, it can be kindness to offer the same pace to those who taught you how to sit still long enough to notice anything at all. The descent is not a victory march. Returning hurts in its own way. Eyes trained to daylight balk at the hearth's shifting glow. Edges that once looked safe blur again. The floor, which you knew by heart, surprises you with a small stone your feet forgot how to read. To the watchers, your hesitation looks like incompetence. You stare too long at the wrong places. You answer slowly because you are translating. You blink more than is polite. Plato warns us to expect this. A person used to sun seems ridiculous in rooms that time has polished. It is tempting to defend yourself, to call the room small and your sight superior. Resist that temptation. The cave is someone's fluency. Treat fluency with respect. So you begin by borrowing the cave's language. You do not sermonize about sources. You point, softly, to the seam in a shadow and wonder aloud what might make it. You ask whether a voice that arrives before a shape might be coming from an angle different than the watchers assume. You choose one object on the parapet, a basket, a small carved horse, and you tell a plain story about how its heft felt in your hand and how its back is simple where the front is careful. You stop before the room tires. You let silence do some of the work that words would spoil. You remember how long it took your own eyes to learn, and you make your sentences long enough to carry patience. Invitation is better than pulling. You do not seize anyone's chin and twist it toward the fire. You suggest an experiment that can be done from where they sit. Listen for the moment when the carrier shifts grip. Notice how a shadow's edge softens when the object passes closer to the flame. Predict together which outline will blur first when the embers settle. These are small turns that do not require a change of seat. If a person tries one and finds it useful, they will invent the next turn for themselves. If they do not, they have not been harmed. Philosophy, in Plato's telling, is not a raid. It is a craft practiced in company, with the gentleness of someone waking a friend from a deep chair, not dragging them out of it. When someone laughs, and someone will, let it land without answering in kind. Laughter is often a shield for fear that prefers jokes to adjustments. If someone grows angry, let your voice grow slower, not louder. Tell the truth that can be carried. You once loved this wall as they do. You still find it comforting some days. You simply learned that the pictures have causes, and causes have textures, and textures are worth touching when the hour allows. If they ask why any of this matters, borrow the day's argument. Things are clearer when lit, and people are kinder when they see more than one layer of a scene. Clear and kind are not enemies. Both are forms of safety. You will need practical measures. Sit nearer the fire at first so your eyes relearn its grammar. Name one shared aim for the hour. Let's test which voices belong to which shapes, so speech has a path to walk. Praise specifics when someone notices a new detail, because praise stores pleasure next to the act and makes the act repeatable. Keep watch on your pride, which likes to dress up as rescue. If you find yourself performing enlightenment, stop and do a small useful thing. Sweep the ash line, steady a plank, return a tool to the hook where a stranger would look first. Usefulness is a better teacher than display. There will be people who are not ready, and that is not a crime. The cave works. It orders a day. It makes a common whether where names can be shared and games can be played without too much cost. Do not insult a shelter because you outgrew it. Leave a door open in your sentences so that anyone who wants to try can try later without feeling that they must confess or switch teams. Return again when the hour is kinder. Bring a cup of water. Bring a quiet joke. Bring steadiness. Plato's traveler is not a recruiter. He is a neighbor who remembers both rooms. If one person turns, a shoulder first, then a neck, guard the scale of the change. Do not rush them past the hearth to the mouth of the cave. Let them have the same steps you had. Reflection, then object, object, then sky, sky, then a brief glance toward the source. Sit with them when their eyes ache. Let them speak first when the names they trusted begin to wobble and new names feel too sharp. The test of your seeing is not how far you can stand in the light. It is how gently you can guide in the dark. When the hour ends, the cave will look as it did before. The wall will host its moving page. The carriers will mind their lane. The fire will keep its promise. Perhaps one or two details will have been added to the room's alphabet. Perhaps only a tone will have changed, so that prediction now feels more like play and less like certainty. That is enough. Understanding grows as bread does, quietly, with time, away from drafts. Walk back up the slope without triumph and without shame. Night air will meet you. The same moon that taught you patience will be waiting. Let it teach you again. For now, rest where you are. The cave exists. The day exists. You know the way between them. Sleep is the third room that makes both bearable, and it is open. Breathe in as if you were standing at the mouth of the cave. Breathe out as if you were carrying a small light to someone who has not yet decided to turn. Plato does not picture education as filling a bucket. He pictures it as turning a face toward a light it was built to receive. The soul, he says, is not empty, it is misaimed. In the cave, the eye looked only where the wall invited it. Outside, the same eye learned to meet a larger sky. Nothing foreign was poured in. Something familiar was reoriented. This is why the pace matters. A head spun quickly sees less, not more. A head turned gently keeps its balance, and the world has time to arrive without blur. The word he uses for the highest light is difficult and simple at once. He calls it the good. Do not be frightened by the size of the word. In this telling, it is not a lecture. It is an effect you can feel. When the good is near, things become clearer without a fight. Meaning stop slipping. Ends and means stop arguing. You can look at a thing and also see why it is worth looking at. Light on a leaf shows the veins. The good on a question shows the purpose. The sun does this for sight, making colors possible and growth steady. The good does this for knowing, making truth graspable and action proportioned. Because the good is like the sun, you learn it the way you learned day, by reflections first, then the things reflected, and only later by a glance toward the source. A fair law is a reflection. A trustworthy person is a reflection. A clean account, a kept promise, a sentence that heals more than it cuts. All are small pools where the good shimmers. You bend over them, see its outline, and your own outline too. Then you trace from reflection to thing, not a law, but justice in the concrete. Not trust, but this hand that returns what it borrowed. Not healing words, but this tone sent at the hour when it could be carried. In time, you risk a brief look upward and understand why certain rooms feel breathable. They are arranged to let this light in. Plato is careful to say that teachers are midwives, not manufacturers. They cannot place the sun, they can clear the doorway. They cannot staple truth to a mind. They can turn the chair so the window is in view. They ask questions that angle the gaze, small ones that do not bruise. What do you mean by that word? What would count as enough? Who is helped by this and who is harmed? What changes if we swap the order? Each answer is a step of the neck rather than a verdict. The student's own sight does the real work and, by doing it, becomes more its own. When this turning takes, a recognizable quiet enters decisions. You begin to test a choice by its fitness to an end that is larger than appetite. Does this move serve a common good or only a mood? Will this sentence leave the bond stronger? Is this speed worth the price someone else will pay tomorrow? The good does not supply slogans. It supplies a scale. You weigh on it and feel, in your hands, when the measure is true. What once felt like cleverness, winning the game of shadows, now feels small beside the calm that comes from acting in a light that does not flicker when the room's opinion shifts. None of this makes you a stranger to ordinary life. It makes you more at home in it. Craftsmen already live by these rules. A potter faces the good of a pot, holding, pouring, lasting, and chooses clay, pressure, and heat accordingly. A nurse faces the good of a patient, dignity, ease, recovery, and arranges light, tone, and timing to fit. A town clerk faces the good of a record, accuracy, clarity, access, and lets that good decide the day's order. Philosophy gives names to what decent hands already know. It says aloud the rule their fingers keep. Aim the work at what the work is for, not at applause. There is a kindness hidden in this view of education. If ignorance is mostly misaiming, then correction can be gentle. You do not shame a person for sitting where they were set. You invite them to try another angle and see if the scene improves. You provide forms that make the better angle easy. Good light on the page, honest scales in the market, meetings that begin with the shared end. You praise the new clarity when it comes, so the mind will associate pleasure with the truer sight and return to it tomorrow without being driven. The cave was patient with you. Be patient with anyone still fluent there. At day's end, the good is not a trophy you carry. It is the light by which you carry anything at all. A little of it is enough to keep a room from quarreling with itself. A little more steadies a week. You will not always feel it strongly. Clouds cross. Work tires the eye. That is why the turning must be a habit. Set your chair where morning finds the window. Ask the small questions that keep ends in view. Choose the act that leaves the next hour more breathable than the last. When you forget, and you will, turn again. The light has not moved far. It does not scold. It waits. Let the lesson stop here. You have a picture of education as reorientation, a sense of the good as the sun of the mind's day, and a few human measures by which to feel it in the palm. If sleep is near, let it. The world will keep its shapes. Tomorrow we can step into the uses and misuses of this seeing in the city, where bright talk often outruns bright deeds, and where patience must learn to hold its ground. For now, turn the face of the mind a finger's width toward the better light, and rest while the adjustment finishes on its own. Plato does not leave the cave and the hillside as private scenery for one person's improvement. He asks what happens when many lives share streets, tools, markets, schools, and courts, when seeing a little more clearly must be translated into public habits that keep the peace. Cities have their own weather. They reward quick words, they love a show, and they often forget slow causes because results have to be counted by noon. In such air, bright talk can outrun bright deeds. A clever mouth can sell a shadow in a new frame and call it progress. So the question becomes quiet and practical. How can light, understanding that includes causes and ends, be built into a town so that even on hurried days the common work stays honest? Plato's first answer is not a speech, it is arrangement. Put good light where decisions are made. In a market, honest scales on open tables with numbers that strangers can read. In a council, minutes written plainly where any citizen can find them tomorrow. In a school, seats turned toward questions rather than toward a single voice that never rests. In a court, time enough to hear before judging, with reasons stated in words a tired ear can carry home. None of this is dramatic. All of it is light translated into furniture. A city that chooses clear arrangements needs fewer heroes to rescue it on Thursdays. Because words steer crowds, Plato worries about show skill untethered to ends. He had a name for it, rhetoric used like paint over damp wood. The surface shines, the wall underneath still crumbles. The cure is not to ban paint. It is to pair speech with measure. Before a policy travels, ask what it is for, who pays its costs, and how we will know it worked without flattering ourselves. Say the shared aim first, then the trade-offs, then the time at which we will check our work. In this tempo, eloquence becomes a servant. It carries the plan instead of replacing it. A city that speaks this way grows allergic to slogans. It prefers sentences that can be tested on a Tuesday. Roles help light keep its shape. Plato imagines guardians, not as bosses with sharper spears, but as custodians of proportion, people trained to love the common good more than their own quick comfort. The title is less important than the habit. A nurse at dawn can be a guardian when she chooses what helps a patient over what flatters herself. A clerk can be a guardian when the numbers tell a truth that will be awkward and he writes it anyway. A teacher can be a guardian when she turns a student's chair toward the window rather than toward her own applause. When many small guardians keep their posts, a city needs fewer alarms. Education, in public, is slow road work. Plato wants customs that make turning the head toward causes easier for everyone. Meetings that begin with the shared end, workshops that clean the bench before closing, notices that state not only the rule but the reason, streets that belong to feet as well as wheels so neighbors meet by accident and the tongue remembers how to be civil. Customs are grooves worn by many feet. They guide the next step when attention is tired. The day after a storm, good customs put brooms in hands without waiting for speeches about civic virtue. Plato also knows that status loves to dress up as excellence. The cave's old game, naming shadows fast, can become a city's pastime under brighter banners. Invitations arrive, and if you are not careful, you begin to prefer rooms where people clap to rooms where problems get smaller. The counterweight is simple. Measure your day by repairs made and burdens properly shared. Ask whether what you did left any stranger's hour easier. Count private praise last. Count clean process first. A city with many such counters is quieter, but it sleeps better. Not everyone will want light at the same pace. Crowds have moods. Plato's traveler who returns to the cave looks clumsy to people fluent in shadows. In town, this looks like resistance to changes that are, on paper, clearly better. Patience is not weakness here. It is strategy. Borrow the crowd's own vocabulary. Offer small trials. Let the better arrangement prove itself by saving time, coin, or confusion. Praise each concrete gain. Do not scold people for preferring the known. Build ramps up which the known can be pushed without breaking. Light that humiliates becomes darkness by another name. Light that serves is welcomed back tomorrow. Because power concentrates, Plato worries about guardians forgetting why they were given keys. His fix is not only personal virtue, it is design against drift. Rotate duties so no hand grows numb. Publish reasons so memory cannot be edited by pride. Pay fairly so bribes look like insult rather than supplement. Allow correction without ceremony so truth can enter a room without asking a favor. These are humble mechanisms. They keep bright talk from hardening into bright armor. At dusk, a city built this way feels ordinary on purpose. Streets work. Records add up. People argue and then still trade with each other the next morning. You will not see fireworks. You will see continuity, which is public peace made visible. Plato would have you be content with that. The good in a city is not a parade. It is the daily clarity by which bakers bake, teachers teach, judges judge, and neighbors nod in doorways without fear. If you want a test you can carry to bed, it is this. Did the arrangements today make it easier for strangers to be decent to one another? If so, the light was not wasted. Let that be the measure for tonight. You do not need to map every council and court in your mind. Picture one honest room with enough light, one custom that saves time tomorrow, one sentence that serves the end before the ego. The cave is still there. The hillside is still there. Between them runs the town where you actually live. Sleep now. In the morning, put one piece of furniture in the right place, and let the day do its quiet teaching. Plato builds his house with conversations. Not speeches that pour, but dialogues that draw. He imagines two chairs, a small table, a lamp turned low, and between them a trade in sentences that move at the speed of trust. The aim is not victory. The aim is a turning. One person brings a word they use every day and sets it on the table. The other does not smash the word or polish it into something rare. They touch it with questions the way a craftsman touches wood, feeling for grain, for knots, for places where a tool would catch. The work is slow on purpose so the mind can keep its balance while it learns to look. The questions are humble tools. What do we mean by the word we just used? Which cases belong inside it, and which do not quite fit? What would count as enough to say that the word is true in this scene? What belongs first, and what follows from it? Each query is a small turn of the neck rather than a shove. The person who asks tries not to perform cleverness. They try to shine a light that lets both see farther than either could alone. The person who answers is not being examined like a road checked for tolls. They are being accompanied like a traveler whose pack is adjusted so it will not bite the shoulder 2 hours from now. Definitions are treated like doors. You can force them and splinter the frame, or you can test the hinges, lift the handle, and see whether the room beyond is the room you meant to enter. A rash definition is tight and brittle. It cracks when the first counterexample knocks. A living definition is firm at the center and generous at the edges. It keeps the main purpose safe while allowing for the variety the world actually brings. The dialogue seeks this living strength. When a counterexample appears, it is welcomed as a guest who shows where the house needs a brace. The tone stays low. No one wins. The room gets better. Elenchus, the old word for testing, is not an ambush. It is a kindness to the future, because a belief that has never been tried cannot carry weight on a day that needs it. In Plato's manner, you ask for reasons as if you and your partner must lift a beam together, and you want to know whether your grip will hold when the stair turns. If a reason slips, you do not drop the beam on their foot. You shift handholds and try again. A belief that fails politely today is far better than a belief that fails loudly in the middle of a bridge with strangers on it. Quiet tests save later noise. The best dialogues use examples from rooms the speakers actually live in. Justice is not only a statue in a square. It is a wage paid on the day promised and a chair given to the older back in a crowded hall. Courage is not only a poem about a field. It is the first sentence of an apology and the last hour of a thankless shift. Temperance is not only a rule about feasts. It is a bedtime kept so tomorrow's patience will exist. By placing ideas on the table beside these small bodies, the talk stays honest. A word that cannot stand next to a broom, a bill, or a tired face is not ready for use. Silence is part of the craft. Between one question and the next, there is a gap where neither hurries to fill the air. In that gap, the mind tries new angles without feeling watched. Sometimes the best help is to keep the lamp steady and wait while a sentence arranges itself in the other person's mouth. If a tangle appears, you do not cut it. You loosen one loop and then another until the cord lies straight. You repeat back what you heard in simpler words and let the speaker correct the part you bent by accident. The aim is shared clarity, not a transcript that flatters the sharper tongue. Because pride is a poor interpreter, the partners make small vows. No trick questions. No sudden topic changes that leave the other speaking to a chair. No laughter that punishes risk. Praise will be specific and quiet, so the hand knows which motion to repeat. Correction will be factual and calm, so the face does not stiffen to hide from it. If heat enters, the talk rests for a minute and returns to the shared end that justified the talk at all. This is not etiquette for its own sake. It is shelter for thinking, which is a delicate task and grows best under gentle weather. At times the roles trade places. The one who began with questions finds their own assumptions on the table. This is not a failure of leadership. It is the sign that the room has become a workshop and not a stage. Socrates, the patron of such rooms, called himself a midwife because the understanding belonged to the other and he merely made the hour hospitable for its birth. You can feel this hospitality in your own chest when a friend's sentence clears fog you did not know you were breathing. Gratitude is the right response. Correcting your map is a gift, not a loss. When the talk ends well, nothing dramatic has happened. No one has been converted or crowned. Yet both leave lighter. A word has been cleaned and put back in the drawer ready for use. A habit has been given a better reason to keep going. A plan has been shaved of its pride and fitted to the size of the day. The cave would call this dull. The hillside would call it practice. Plato would call it education in miniature, the art of turning the face, together, toward the kind of light that lets ordinary work be done without waste. Let this be tonight's pace. 2 chairs, 1 lamp. A word you use often. Turn slowly until the grain shows. If sleep wants you, let the questions keep their shape in the dark. They do not need guarding. In the morning you can ask one of them at a real table where a real day waits, and the answer, measured against the shared end, will be kinder for having been found with company. Plato often speaks of cities because cities are large enough to see, but the pattern he draws is meant for a smaller place you carry with you. The self, which also has streets and gates, voices and markets, watches and laws. He says there are 3 steady workers inside this little city. Reason looks for causes and aims and keeps the map. Spirit, the quick, hot part that flares at praise or insult, enforces what reason judges right and lends courage to keep a course. Appetite asks for necessary goods, warmth, food, rest, company, and sometimes for more than is needed. Disorder comes when any one worker tries to be the whole city. Order comes when each keeps its task and all move under a light that lets them see how their tasks fit. You can picture the three by the cave's furniture. Reason is the turn of the neck and the climb, slow, deliberate, willing to be uncomfortable if the seeing improves. Spirit is the step that actually stands and walks, the part that says yes to cost and no to fog. Appetite is the hearth and the lane, heat that keeps life possible, motion that brings supplies, ordinary wants that, in their place, are good. The wall becomes a problem only when appetite mistakes pictures for food and tries to live on shadows. The climb becomes a problem only when reason forgets the body and tries to abolish rooms where people actually sleep and eat. Spirit becomes a problem when it defends habit for its own sake or turns courage into noise. The work is not to silence any part. The work is to tune them. Tuning begins by letting reason speak first without making a speech. Each morning give it one clean sentence about the day's end. Keep trust, finish the honest task, leave the bond stronger. Written where eyes will meet it. The line is a small sun for the hours to turn by. When appetite arrives with a dozen suggestions, reason can point at the sentence and choose quietly. When spirit arrives wanting victory, reason can point again and choose proportion. In Plato's figure, reason does not carry a whip. It carries a scale and lays the proposed act on the plate marked fit for the end, or not yet. Then invites spirit to be an ally rather than a foreman. Spirit is the part that stands up when standing is costly. It keeps posture when a room would slump. Ask it to guard decisions already weighed instead of patrolling every corner for offense. It can take pride in clean work rather than in loud work, in returning a tool to the hook where a stranger would look first, in finishing a message with warmth when the day has made warmth expensive. When anger comes, and it will, send spirit to the hinge instead of the door. Let it turn you toward the shared end before it tries to win a point. In attuned self, spirit is the quiet officer who holds a lamp while reason reads the map and appetite loads the cart. Finally, treat appetite as a citizen, not an invader. Feed it on time. Give it decent sleep, light, movement, and simple food that does not ask tomorrow to pay today's bill. Appetite that is respected can be taught. Appetite that is shamed rebels and bargains in the dark. Plato would have you choose images the way you choose meals. What you watch and scroll becomes the wall your mind learns to love. A diet of sneer and spectacle makes spirit jumpy and reason tired. A diet of clear craft, clean speech, and ordinary kindness teaches appetite to like enough. Shadows are not forbidden. They are portioned. Let the wall show a few quiet pictures, and then let the lamp go out. Habits are the city's laws, small, regular forms that make virtue ordinary. Give each part of the self its time and place. Reason gets the first 2 minutes with a pencil. Appetite gets pauses that are not bribes, but maintenance. Water, air, a walk around the room where the eyes can look far. Spirit gets a lane to spend itself where it helps. Finishing the dull job, saying the true sentence, making the apology that keeps the house able to breathe. At night, close the city as shopkeepers do. Sweep the bench. Write one line, what end did I serve? Reset the room so morning does not begin with search. These closures are not drama. They are a music the three workers can march to without stepping on each other's feet. Sometimes the tuning fails. Appetite buys fog. Spirit bites a friend. Reason wanders into theories that cannot carry groceries. Repair is the same each time. Name what happened, take the smallest act that reduces harm, and reset the form that would have saved you. Replace the open bowl with a closed jar. Put the phone out of reach during the hours you owe to work or to love. Write the apology in a sentence that names the fault and the change. Set the reserve clause. If nothing prevents, so bad weather does not turn a miss into a story about your character. The point is not to be flawless. The point is to keep the 3 workers willing to come back to work tomorrow. Plato would have you notice the city's sounds when it is well ordered. Reason is quiet even when it is firm. Spirit speaks short and keeps its hands busy. Appetite hums low because it is fed and does not need to shout. In such a room, pleasure and pain learn their proper jobs. Pleasure praises the fitting act so you want to repeat it. Pain warns when you drift far from the end you named. If pleasure starts praising what steals the next hour, or pain starts shouting about work that is simply work, retune. The scale is still on the table. The lamp is still lit. There is also the matter of company, because even a private city takes its tone from neighbors. Keep near people whose spirit defends ends rather than egos, whose appetite likes enough, whose reason says, let's measure, before it says, let's perform. Borrow their customs. Trade your own in return. Conversation, as the last chapter taught, is the workshop where the city's tools are sharpened without embarrassment. Ask for one correction you can bear. Offer one praise that is specific. Sit under a lamp with someone who likes clarity and kindness in the same sentence, and let their rhythm improve your own. As night comes, turn the figure back to the cave and the hill so the picture stays one piece. The cave is appetite's comfort and must be kept clean of tricks. The hill is reason's labor and must be climbed without contempt for feet. The walk between is spirit's service and must be done without armor that makes neighbors flinch. When the 3 work together, even ordinary work rests easier in the hands. Fire warms without lying. Day clarifies without scolding. The lane carries useful things. The wall is a page no one needs to worship. The mouth of the cave is a doorway no one needs to fear. Let the lamps lower now. You do not need to master a system before sleep. You need to leave the self tidy enough that morning will recognize its rooms. Place tomorrow's note where eyes will find it. Set water where a hand will reach it. Put one tool where a stranger would look first. Say to the 3 workers what a good keeper says at closing. Thank you. Morning again, if nothing prevents. Then be only a sleeper for a while. The city can be governed on softer terms than worry imagines, and governance begins again when you wake. Plato adds another picture beside the cave, quieter and more like a ruler laid on a table. He calls it a line with 4 stretches, each standing for a way the mind can look at the world. At the dim end are pictures, shadows, reflections, symbols, rumors, things that look like things. Next are ordinary sights and beliefs, the solid chairs and cups you can touch, and the everyday judgments you make about them. Above that comes reasoning with diagrams and numbers, plans, measures, proofs that lean on marks we make, not on what the hand can grab. At the brightest end sits understanding, the moment when reasons answer to deeper reasons, and you see why the parts belong together, the way a melody belongs to its meter and not only to its notes. Plato does not scold any section of the line. Each has a proper job. Trouble starts only when we try to live on one stretch all the time, or when we forget how to walk from one to the next. Begin at the end you know best. Pictures are how most days start. A sign on a door, a sketch in a margin, a weather map with green and yellow bands. Even the lists we make are small pictures of hours we have not lived yet. Pictures are quick teachers, and you can thank them without mistaking them for the lesson. A floor plan tells you where the window ought to be. It does not let the breeze in. A logo tells you what a shop promises. It does not guarantee decent scales on the counter. If you treat pictures as invitations to look closer, they are friends. If you treat them as meals, you will be hungry by noon. A step up is contact with things. Here the hand and the eye work together. The cup is not a drawing. It is heavy when full and rings a certain way when set down. A neighbor is not a profile image. She is a voice on the stair and a need you can meet before she asks. Belief at this level is not silly. It is the ordinary trust by which life moves. You know the kettle will boil if the flame holds. You know a promise from this friend is a promise you can budget with. Plato's line says, "Do not leave this ground. Return to it often." Let pictures answer to contact so your talk does not float. On the third stretch, the mind borrows marks of its own, making to see farther. Grids, measures, schedules, charts, the skeletons under messy days. A builder snaps a chalk line, and suddenly uneven boards learn to agree. A nurse writes a chart, and hour by hour the fog of a long night becomes a story someone else can read. A clerk sets numbers in columns, and a business that felt fine reveals where it is bleeding. This is not yet the top of the line, but it is already rescue. You accept the discipline of forms so reality can visit you without disguise. If a form begins to boss you, remember why you drew it. To serve ends you could name without blushing, safety, fairness, good work done without waste. The last stretch is understanding, the kind that feels like a room filling with daylight rather than like a point scored. Here you notice how the form and the fact belong to a deeper fitting. The chalk line serves the straightness a wall needs to stand. The chart serves the recovery a body seeks. The budget serves the trust that wages will arrive when promised. In this brighter air, you stop asking only what works and begin to ask, what is the work for? The sun in the cave story makes things visible. The good in the line picture makes fits and purposes visible. It does not usually shout. It shows. Because days are human, you will walk the line back and forth. Plato would have you practice the walk on purpose. Start a task with one clear picture that earns its place. A tiny sketch, a short list, a sign set where the eye will actually find it. Touch the thing the picture stands for. Visit the room, pick up the tool, speak with the person whose name sits on the page. Lay one helpful form over the scene, a measure, a timetable, two columns that separate must from nice. Then, before you move, ask one in question. What is this for? Who is helped? Who pays? How will we know we did no harm? For small moves, picture, contact, form, and then act. And let the action teach the next pass along the line. Used this way, the line softens quarrels. The person who loves charts learns to thank the person who loves field work, because the form without the contact gets brittle. The person who loves field work learns to thank the person who loves charts, because the contact without the form gets lost. The person who loves ideas learns to thank both, because the end without the tools stays a slogan. And those who live by pictures at the start of every day, signs, lists, icons, learn to let go of them once the door is open, because a picture that refuses to step aside becomes a wall again. You can feel the line working even in a single conversation. Someone brings a claim that is mostly image. This policy will be a disaster. You ask for one piece of contact, a case, a neighborhood, a morning at a particular counter. You help them draw one form, a timeline, a budget, a small trial with a check-in point. You end by naming one shared good, fewer errors, quicker service, dignity at the desk, and you ask for a way to measure it that both sides would call fair. The talk cools. Pride has less air. The room begins to agree on what it means to work beyond the feeling of winning. At night, the line becomes a lullaby. Pictures fade first. The day's images pass across the inside of the eyelids and then thin out. The body remembers contact, the chair, the sheet, the breath that lengthens when the lamp goes down. Forms take their turn. Tomorrow's small squares arrange themselves and then blur. The end drops last. A quiet sense that the work serves something large enough to let you close your eyes without checking the door twice. You do not have to force this order. You can help it by a few small habits. Put one picture in the right place for morning, touch one real thing you cared for today, set one modest form that will save an hour, name one end you served in a sentence short enough to hold. If you forget, begin again at the gentle end. Print a clean sign for the project that keeps arriving without a name. Visit the room where your decision lands so your forms do not float. Trim a spreadsheet until it fits the task instead of the pride. Ask the end question before the send button and again before the door latch. The line is patient. It is a tool to lay beside your day, not a ruler to wrap your knuckles. Each step up includes the step below. Each step down reminds the higher step of what it is for. Let the chapter close with a plain picture. A bench at a window. On it a small card with tomorrow's end in one line. Beside it a tool laid where a stranger would look first. Under it a list that is short enough to win. Above it a sky that will be there whether you deserve it or not. This is Plato's line made domestic. This is a way to keep the turning gentle. Breathe once for pictures, once for things, once for forms, once for ends. Then let sleep do its work, which is also a kind of understanding. Putting the pieces in order while the lamp is out. In the morning we will draw the last stretch. How to keep what you have learned without making a show of it. And then we will let the cave and the line return to being furniture in a room you can use. What the cave and the line have been teaching all along is not a stunt for a single night, but a way to keep house with your own mind. The turn, the climb, the patient looking, the return, all of it wants a shape you can repeat without speeches. Begin by letting the day have a quiet north. Write one plain sentence in the morning and put it where your eyes cannot miss it. Keep trust, serve the shared end, leave the bond stronger. Do not decorate it. Let it be a small sun the hours can circle. When choice arrives dressed as hurry, point to the sentence and choose in its light. When pride offers a shortcut, point again and keep the slow road you meant to travel. Carry the cave and the hillside together so you do not grow scornful of rooms that once sheltered you. Work where you actually are. If your hands are in a shop, give the counter honest scales and the shelf clear labels. If you keep a desk, give the page a heading that states the end before the plan begins. If you are moving through a crowded day, bring the small customs that keep speech kind. Say the shared aim first. Ask for facts before heat. Praise specifics so the right motion comes back tomorrow. These are ways of turning the face toward causes without insulting the shadows that still help us remember where we have been. Let attention, like the traveler's eyes, warm up by reflections and then move to things. Start with one picture that earns its space, a thumbnail sketch, a 3-line list, and then go touch what the picture stands for. Visit the room your decision will change. Lift the tool you are writing about. Speak with the person whose name sits on your page. When the contact is honest, lay a light form over it, a measure that fits, a timetable that spares, 2 columns that separate must from maybe. Before you act, ask one end question so the motion owns its purpose. Who is helped? Who pays? How will we know we did no harm? You do not need a lecture. You need 4 quiet moves that the body can remember even on a tired afternoon. Honor the small city you carry within. Let reason keep the map without turning cruel. Let spirit hold a lamp to the hinge when a choice must turn. Let appetite be fed on time so it does not raid the store at midnight. Give each its lane. Give each its rest. When a miss arrives, and it will, repair it in 3 steps that fit tired hands. Name what happened without drama. Do the smallest act that reduces harm. Reset one form that would have saved you. If you owe an apology, send it in a single sentence that names the fault and the change. If you owe a boundary, set it without anger and keep it without speeches. This is not heroism. It is housekeeping for a soul that wants to be usable again tomorrow. Keep company that likes the light for what it reveals rather than for how it flatters. Sit with people who can ask, "What is this for?" in a tone that keeps friendship intact. Trade short proofs instead of long performances. Let someone test a beam you mean to carry before you walk it over a crowd. Offer the same service in return and be grateful when your plan gets trimmed to a size a human day can actually lift. Conversation can be the softest school. 2 chairs, 1 lamp. A word you use often laid on the table and turned until the grain shows. Leave with a cleaner tool rather than a clever line. If you return to rooms where shadows still hold attention, and you will, bring patience, not a torch. People fluent in a pattern do not deserve your contempt. They deserve your steadiness. Borrow their words and offer small, testable turns. Notice where the edge softens. Listen for the grip change. Try one trial that returns a clear measure by evening. If nothing moves, close the hour gently and leave a door in your sentences so someone who is not ready today can be ready later without shame. If something moves, praise it quietly so the pleasure sits next to the act and the act repeats without being driven. In the day, the way a shop closes when the light grows gold on the window. Sweep the bench. Return tools to the hook where a stranger would look first. Write one honest line about the end you served and one small change that will save an hour tomorrow. Place the first object morning should touch where the hand will find it. Add the reserve clause, if nothing prevents, so weather cannot turn a living plan into a quarrel. Then put down the roll you carried and let the room belong to sleep. The cave will still be there. The hillside will still be there. The road between them will still take feet. You have kept the light. Now let the dark keep you. Thank you for drifting through Plato's cave the gentle way. If sleep has already found you, let it keep you. If you are still awake, breathe once for the room you know, once for the world outside it, and once for the quiet light that makes both easier to live in. When morning comes, set one small thing in the right place and let the day do its kind work. Sleep well.